Hello, friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am checking in to update and talk about Shameless September and the challenges that have been posed. And yeah, to just update and talk about shame and what's unfolding and what's showing up. And I'm going to change this filter because I did not pick it. This always does this to me. So I just posted our most recent challenge in the group. And just to recap, if you haven't been following along, the first one was all about receiving our vision. And so how shame acts as a barrier to really hearing what our needs and our visions are. So these needs and visions are sacred, right? They are our soul communicating with us to kind of like guide us in this life and let us know like what we are meant to be up to and how we are really meant to be in the world, which then guides our doing. I think oftentimes we spend so much time being guided and driven by what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do or make money, or the doing, right? And not the being part. And really the doing will follow the being. And shame can totally block us from receiving that being component of us. Being very clear on how I wish to be in the world, how I wish for my life to be, how I wish to be of service to myself, so that I can then be of service to others, whether it's my family or my clients, my coworkers, my community. It blocks us from that being component, because oftentimes there's shame associated with that being component. And then we get caught up in the doing to compensate for our unhappiness or our inability to feel the being component of us, and it can become very, very challenging. So that was kind of the foundation for this Shameless September experience, was to feel into receiving your vision and receiving the being aspect of you that will then drive the doing. Because without that, it's really just a bunch of frenetic, unintentional, purposeless doing that is incredibly exhausting and doesn't really get us anywhere. And if you have ever experienced this way of being, drop me a little comment or a like, because I know I'm not the only one whose life has been in periods at one time or another of just like hyperactive doing in an attempt to find the being. So that was challenge 1. Challenge 2 was recognizing shame in the body. And I did a fabulous, if I do say so myself, live on this last week about shame showing up in the body in so many ways. Truly, shame is at the core, the epicenter of all dysfunction in our lives. So if it's physical body dysfunction, if it's relationship dysfunction, work dissatisfaction, any type of challenge or suffering is rooted in shame, period. So yeah, bodily functions, especially as women, we talked a lot in this group on a post I did last week about, or the week before, about our cycles and the shame around that. That was a beautiful thread of discussions. I highly invite you to go check out that thread and to share the story of your first moon. That was the invitation I posed to the group, and there were some beautiful stories and also some sadness in those stories. And my takeaway from that thread was really that this shame runs deeply, especially around the body. There's a lot of shame around parts of ourselves that are transient and shifting and in flux and ever changing. And the body, especially a woman's body, is like the definition of that. So recognizing the shameful parts of ourselves that are in flux and in transition so often. That was the second challenge. And then it was feeling your emotions. And so especially with uncomfortable or unpleasant emotions, those strong emotions that bring challenge, there's a lot of shame because we've been programmed to not feel and to not express. And we are generally very uncomfortable when others are expressing. And we quickly try to fix them, right? Like, don't cry. It's okay. Aren't you being a little overreactive? Aren't you being too sensitive? And that dialogue is often in our own heads towards ourselves. And so we act as our own kind of filter for our own emotional expressions, like to ourselves in private, where no one's around. Like, what is that about? So feel your emotions. That was the third challenge, and shamelessly feeling them. They need to flow. When emotions become stagnant as the result of shame, that energy needs to flow. And when it doesn't, it stagnates and it lands in the physical body. Emotions are simply physiological reactions. Physiological meaning that they create some type of chemistry, some type of change in the physical body, which is perfectly healthy and normal in a flowing system, a flowing body system, which is what we're meant to be. And when we deny that flow, it creates a breeding ground for dis-ease. It's like, holding your bowels and noticing how, like, over time, you're going to have some issues, right? You're going to be really prone to constipation and stomach issues. Holding in sneezes. I had a client that was doing that habitually and ended up with some really nasty sinus problems. So it's the same exact thing. It is a just different, subtler form of energy that, although you cannot see, like how you can see your hand, is creating very real impacts on what you can see, because the subtle is always creating the gross. So the subtle being your emotional, mental, and energetic or spiritual components are always creating your physical experience and your body and your health and your lives and your relationships, always creating that. And those subtle imprints, those subtle realms, when they are experiencing dysfunction and challenge, is always the root of shame. Period. Some level, some flavor of a shame story. The fourth challenge of 5, the fifth I just posed, was to experience deeper intimacy. So shame is a barrier to intimacy, whether that is intimacy in a romantic relationship or in relationship with your children, your parents, your siblings, your friends, your coworkers, the person who bags your groceries, or I was going to say delivers your newspapers. Anyone still getting papers delivered? Shame acts as a barrier to that intimacy. So anytime we are experiencing resentments or anger towards another, it's really a reflection on us being ashamed of expressing some need or an emotion, an emotional state, something that we are feeling. And so because the shame is there around that emotion, or the shame is there around expressing that need, because we're like, oh, why do I have this need in the first place? And now I have to express it and then receive it. There's shame around receiving. That's a way that shame can show up as a barrier to intimacy in relationships. Another way is a fear of, and I hear this so much, and I've definitely experienced this myself, and I'm imagining you have as well, because you're also a human. Fear of being taken over by another or losing yourself in another. So it's like, I get in relationships and I lose myself completely, or I get taken over by another. That is another way of shame showing up. That's a story that you're telling yourself because you're ashamed to exert boundaries. You're ashamed of having needs. You're ashamed of acknowledging and expressing those needs and boundaries and then receiving them. And another way it can show up is having a difficult time receiving. So receiving support, help, compliments, pleasure from the other. Losing contact with and underestimating your own center of power and strength in relationship. So succumbing to codependency or making your life all about the other person because you're ashamed of like having your own needs and your own thing. Not authentically sharing your opinions or ideas because there may be some shame around having them in the first place, or you may have been shamed or programmed to believe that expressing opinions and ideas is somehow wrong or shameful or unwelcome. Someone may have made you feel like, we don't care what you have to say, so shut up. Various examples and instances where that could be the case. And also experiencing unfulfilling sexual encounters with another in intimate relationships. Because there's shame around, we have so much shame around sex and the body. And then you pile on top of that shame around expressing your needs in relationship and shame around being seen, all of these different things. Another way that shame acts as a barrier to intimacy. So I gave you a challenge for that. And the most recent one is to express your truth. And so this ties in perfectly with everything thus far. So we've worked on receiving our vision and feeling our emotions and recognizing where shame lives in the physical body, and then recognizing shame as a barrier to intimacy. And so now you get to express your truth. That is my latest challenge to you. Shame keeps us from sharing our opinions and our likes and our dislikes. And it really can act as a barrier to us expressing like who we are at our core essence. And I've given this analogy, this imagery many times. It really resonates with me when I think about trauma and how it affects us. And this block to us engaging with the world just kind of as our authentic essence it's like a combination of our own life experiences and traumas and ancestral traumas and shame that also lives in us, and social programming. So these different elements, kind of pile on top of us, and I just imagine all of us walking around with like full body armor, like old medieval knights. And so clearly that's not us. It's us. We're there. We are covered and walking around with full body armor. And so is most everybody else. So you have this clash of stories, of ancestral traumas, of patterns, of all of this just varying expressions of shame in these full body armors. And we're all just kind of like clashing around, and there's sparks flying, and it's like not really us. Our true, authentic, shameless self, free of these pains and shames and stories and all this crap, is like way in the back, just kind of watching it all like, I'd love to come out and play. I would love for me to lose these pieces of armor that are blocking me from like fully engaging with the world and with my life, like really being here and really showing up and receiving and getting my needs met. So you get to express your truth. That is my most recent challenge. So what is inside of you that longs to be expressed? And if you could express that, and all of the stories that you have around what would happen if you did express it, right? Like, no one would get me, I would lose friends, I would lose my job, I would lose respect, like all of these different things that we have. What if all of those were bullshit? And what if you just showed up as yourself without the armors in all circumstances? Like, what would happen? And what if it was exactly what you needed? And what if it was exactly what another person needed? So that is the most recent challenge, is to express, just go for it. Find a safe container with safe people that you can express. This is certainly one of those places. Or simply be radically exposed to yourself. A lot of us have resistance towards that, towards being naked, literally and figuratively, with ourselves. So that is what I have for you today. And just checking one more thing. I would love to know, as we've been diving into shame and really presencing its ways, what has been showing up for you and what are you noticing? I've had a lot of people share that, you know, they haven't thought about shame in this way. They have felt this way and didn't realize that that was what they were feeling, or had only thought about shame in one way, not realizing it exists on a spectrum, and it really is at the core of all of our dysfunction and challenges and suffering. So if you peel away like what you think is the issue or the challenge at the surface, if we just kind of like peel away and peel away and peel away, you're gonna find at the center of that. So like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Roll? At the center of that, you're gonna find shame. It's a flavor of shame. So I'm curious what is showing up for you, and as you presence this, what you notice as the emotional shifts take place. Because anytime we shift something emotionally and mentally, anytime we feel a long, deeply held wound that we have been resisting and just not wanting to feel, anytime we access and touch into that, anytime we have those beautiful aha moments, physiological shifts happen and healing takes place so quickly, because you're allowing that vital life force energy, of which, I mean, like, we only have so much, right? Like, we are limitless beings. However, this physical body is limited and is, you know, has an expiration date. And we are really just kind of putting the miles on real quick when we are allowing these subtle realms with their clogged wounds and their clogged flow to like just be existing. It's like we're feeding this parasite. Not that our emotions are parasites, however, they can kind of morph when they stagnate, and they are not the helpful messengers that they are intended to be. They turn into these kind of like little gremlin type things that aren't helping us and are just like sucking life force away. Because an emotion, as I said, creates a physiological response in the body. So if you're living in this perpetual place of fight or flight, and things aren't safe, and I'm so shameful, and all the other things that go along with it, you're constantly sending that message and that impulse, that chemical reaction to your system. So let's just like racking up the miles real quick on this physical body. And it's challenging our health, and it's really sucking our resiliency away. And it's just not helpful. So as you peel these things and get to the core and feel into the shame story and just like let it be there and like, okay, you're here, I feel you, sweet. Just how quickly those changes and shifts happen. So that's what I wanted to share today. Thank you for listening. Please let me know how this is going for you, any questions that you have, and how I may continue to be of service on your journey. Tune into the podcast, Subtle Medicine. We've been putting out a lot of really amazing stuff lately, especially in regards to shame. And that's what I got. All right. So much love.